What's going on, guys? Nick Whalen and Alex Barutha here with you. It is Monday, November 18th. Talking fantasy basketball. We'll give you a weekend recap, talk about all the injury news. We'll take a look at the schedule, talk some waiver wire, and of course, throughout the show, take all of your live Q&As. So make sure you get those in the chat. You've been giving us great questions so far this season. Always looking forward to answering those. Alex, we want to talk about some pleasant surprises so far this season. So you and I each have a list of some players, some teams. I have a coach on there for me as well, who I've been pleasantly surprised by. But I want to start out with some takeaways from the weekend, some waiver wire talk. A lot of our leagues run waivers late Sunday night. You outbid me for Moussa Diabate, Alex.
I had to do it. I desperately needed a forward because DeMar DeRozan was going to sit today, and I had no backup forwards on my roster. So I'm like, I got to just sort by forwards and go for it. Yeah, Diabate or Diabate. I think it's Diabate. I'll have to check.
I'll trust you on
that. As you should. He had a bad game against Cleveland last night. The fun came to an end, but I think that was a matchups thing. I mean, going up against Mobley and Jared Allen, I think, Charlotte was trying to go basically just some floor spacing. Like, they did not want to challenge those guys inside. They went with some Grant Williams. So I'm not panicking, but this is just what you deal with when you have a guy who is on a two-way deal and is a third string center who has basically been playing 20 plus minutes per game for a week and a half.
Yeah, maybe we should have gone with more of like a clickbait title for this episode. Time to panic on Moussa Diabate. But that's where we are right now with the Charlotte Hornets, who continue to give us very little in the way of updates on both Nick Richards and Mark Williams. I mean, we know Richards is at least out for another week, dealing with that fractured rib. My guess is that given the Hornets' history, it'll extend well beyond that. Mark Williams still game to game, I guess. Has yet to debut this season.
Yeah. I really don't know. That was sort of my thing with grabbing. It is Diabate, according to Basketball Reference. Diabate in fantasy, because I just am not convinced Mark Williams is coming back anytime soon. The Nick Richards thing, I feel like they're trying to play it off like it's not that big of a deal that he fractured his rib. So we just don't know, but I'm going to be under the assumption that he's going to be out probably at least a couple more weeks.
Yeah.
So I think Diabate is rosterable right now.
I think so too. 3-game week coming up for Charlotte. It is a big 3-game week across the NBA in general. We don't have very many teams with 4 games. I think it's only 8. So Chicago, Golden State, Houston, Indy, the Clippers, Milwaukee, Orlando, and Philly are your teams with 4 games this week. We do have a handful of teams with only 2 games too. Miami, Minnesota, OKC, and Phoenix, which that's a pretty big blow. A lot of fantasy relevant players on those 4.
Yeah, this is a very good week to stream. If your team is in a bad position right now and your bench is just full of guys who aren't that good or injured guys you need to drop, this is the perfect week to snap up a bunch of guys on 4-game weeks and just stream them in and make up some ground.
We get an organic Diabate question here from DJ Andre, Alex. He says that we drop in Diabate in a 12-team league, probably.
I think he is droppable. You do not need to roster Diabate in a 12-team league, but if you're in a deeper league, like the league Nick and I are talking about, where I picked him up as a 16-team league, I want to wait and see what happens against Brooklyn, which is Charlotte's next game, and then they play Detroit and Milwaukee. So teams that do not project to have the sort of front court that Cleveland has. So that's a wait and see for deeper leagues, but no, you don't have to roster him in a 12.
In terms of other players who were added in the RotoWire Stake League, again, this is a 16-team league, so don't feel like you need to rush out and grab any of these if you're in a 10 or a 12, but we saw Taurean Prince added. We saw Josh Okogie added, Jonathan Isaac, Delano Banton, who I thought about throwing in a bid for, Vince Williams, Chris Dunn. I was outbid for him by our guy Kirian. Dalton Connect was added, Kyle Filipowski. And then the big one, of course, I was actually surprised that he was still out there this week. Jared McCain. I believe I bid, it's $100 budget. I think I bid 17. There were a bunch of bids in the league. Basically, everybody threw in a bid. Most of them were somewhere between $12 and then I think 21 or 22. Jared McCain went for $77, Alex, in our league.
I haven't checked. It was DJ that made that move. I haven't checked his roster and seen if he like needs threes and points. Because if he needs threes
right
and
now.
points, then I think this move makes sense. We don't know exactly how long Tyrese Maxey is out for. I would not be surprised if he's out for another 2 weeks. I mean, it was announced 3 days ago that he just resumed on court work 3 days ago, and then will be reevaluated basically like early this week. So it's kind of unclear. So I think you'll at least get a week of McCain. And even when Maxey is back, clearly McCain is their fourth best scoring option. Like, it's not even close. And I think there's still a role for him to play 30 minutes a game, whether it's starting or off the bench. So it's possible he retains like top 150 value. I do think in a 16 team league, he should be rostered, but it is kind of a wait and see.
Yeah, I think once Maxey's back, he's still going to be in the mix. He's played so well that he's going to be a part of the rotation. And, it's like Embiid is probably out tonight with an illness. Like, there's all these random things that just keep happening that allow McCain to keep this run going. And I think you're right that he does have another week in him. Like, I think the chances that we see Maxey back in full by the end of the week are relatively slim, maybe over the weekend. But the Sixers are one of those teams with a 4-game week. So, if you're really looking to cash in, this would be the week to do it. I don't know how much longevity there's going to be after that, but it's just a matter of whether you think Maxey could get hurt again. I mean, even Maxey's more the 1-to-1 for McCain, but even Paul George or Embiid missing extended time would help him too.
I mean, their roster is just so thin that no matter who gets hurt, it could result in at least just more touches for McCain, if not more minutes.
Yeah, no question about that. Let's talk about some of our early season pleasant surprises, Alex, and we'll get to the questions in the chat. For me, we got to start with Dyson Daniels. I mean, it's just been incredible. I mean, leads the NBA in steal rate by a mile. Feels like every single night, you're checking the box score and Dyson Daniels is giving you 4, 5, 6 steals. He is up to 44 steals on the year in 12 games. That is 16 more than any other player. Jalen Williams has 28 and he's played 2 more games.
Daniels is a 25th ranked player this month in November. Part of me thought, hey, maybe the steals are sort of luck or sort of like regression might be coming. And then I looked up the deflection numbers, which were basically twice his steal numbers. And that's sort of how, like, generally speaking, you get half the amount of steals that you get deflections. So I think this is pretty legit. Now, 3.7, if he averages 3.7 for the year, that would be absurd. But even if you can get, upper twos, like 2.9 out of Daniels, he's still going to be, he is in the category, I think, of league winner potentially, because a lot of guys were drafting. I mean, you could draft, sometimes he went undrafted, but the last 2 picks in a lot of fantasy leagues, he was there. And now I think he's pretty solidly a top 50 player.
Well, let's take a trip back and look at his ADP. So composite ADP, according to our site, 149. Yeah. He was going at pick 130 in ESPN leagues, 140 in Yahoo leagues, 178 in Underdog. I mean, you were in a lot of leagues, you were literally getting him for free. And that's somebody that now you're locking into your starting lineup without even thinking about it. I mean, in a category league, he's been a cheat code, much in the way that like Rudy Gobert was a blocks cheat code back in the day, or Victor Wembanyama has become that essentially this year. I mean, nobody else is even close to touching him in terms of the steals. And like you said, I mean, I don't think this is a fluke by any means. Like his like off nights, he's giving you 2 or 3 steals.
Yeah, his floor has just been so high in the steals. It's not like some guys who are getting like 0, then 2, then 0, then 3, then 1. Yeah, pretty much. To me, there's not that much more to say other than it's like the steals production is ridiculous. I think it's mostly real. I would not be, he's only shooting 60% from the free throw line and 27% from 3. To be honest with you, I would not expect those numbers to increase significantly. He's just not been a good offensive player his entire career. The fact that he's averaging 15 points is great. I think he can continue doing that, but I would not be like, he's going to start shooting better and then he's the best player in fantasy. It's not going to happen.
Another pleasant surprise who I have on my list is Jordan Poole, Alex. And, you and I throughout the offseason kind of extolled the virtues of Jordan Poole in fantasy versus how much he damages your team in real life. The Wizards, I think, are about as bad as we thought they would be I don't think this is a team that has any designs on, pushing for a playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. They are 2-10 on the year. I know mathematically they're not that far out, but I don't see this team, improving dramatically over the course of the year. But Jordan Poole off to a really nice statistical start, 22 points, 4.5 assists, 2.1 steals per game for him as well, which has been huge. He had a nice run to start the year. I think 6 or 7 games in a row with multiple steals. And the shooting numbers. I mean, we knew he was one of the elite free throw shooters in the NBA. He's taking over 4 per game. He's shooting 92%, but 46% from the field, 45.3% from beyond the arc, which is due to regress at some point. But I still think we could be looking at low 40s for him.
I think so too. The steals worried me a little bit. I do think those will come down, but it's 3.6 deflections per game. So I think it's relatively sticky. Like the steals have been helping him just as much as the 3-point shooting, in my opinion, if not more. I mean, he's essentially doubled his steal rate from last year, which is, we know how much that can like swing players' fantasy value. But the fact that he's just been a really efficient offensive player, he's getting to the free throw line. So there's that 92% for the free throw line matters for you. It's just been a revelation for people who drafted him. What was he drafted? I don't know if you like in the 80s. More or less this year, kind of where he was, he ended up settling like in per game value last year.
Yeah, somewhere in the 80s, depending on what site you look at. He was in the late 70s in best ball, but yeah, Yahoo, ESPN, kind of mid to late 80s. Again, I think there was just like a stink on Jordan Poole because of his reputation with the Wizards, and hopefully you took that chance because there were a lot of landmines in that range. Who you got on your list? Pleasant surprises so far for you?
I would say the only other player on my list that I would consider a potential league winner, if we want to use that term, would be Norman Powell. Now, I think Powell is going, I mean, he has started regressing a little bit, but another guy who was going undrafted in some leagues, was the last pick in a lot of leagues. And yeah, his past 3 games have not been great. But if this sticks roughly, if he's going to shoot 47% for the field, 45% from 3, probably a little bit less than that, it's like you're still getting 20 points a game out of him. With a steal, he's given you only 2.5 assists, but that's more than he has in the past. That's a career high, 2.5 assists for Norman Powell. And if you needed points late in your draft, this was just a complete win for you.
Yeah, huge windfall. I mean, he's been fantastic. Like you said, last 3 games, we're starting to regress a little bit, which was due at some point, but still on balance, he's been a huge value. I think you could say the same for Zubac. Wasn't quite as consistent to begin the year. I mean, had a few really good games. I think Powell sustained that a bit longer. And, Zubac has had a little bit more up and down fluctuation. He had that 8.6 rebounds against Houston early last week. And then he comes back yesterday against Utah, 22 points, 11 boards, 2 blocks. Despite playing over 7 more minutes per game compared to last season, like the scoring's up, the rebounding is up. That's great. He's not really blocking that many more shots. He's at 1.2 blocks again, which is the same as last year. So that's been a little bit of a disappointment. You'd like to see that tick up closer or even past 1.5. And he has regressed a bit in terms of the percentages too. Like part of the reason I always love Zubac in category leagues is he's been a, well north of 70% free throw shooter. Very good for a big man. He's at 59% this year, and he's down about 7 percentage points from the field as well.
He's been better for people in, I think, points leagues just because those percentages are down.
Yeah.
Like he's averaging 37 fantasy points per game, which is crazy for Zubac. But you're right. Obviously you drafted him because his percentages and his free throw have been high, but also like the fact that you're getting the extra points and rebounds and assists and all that. I think that counters the fact that his efficiency is a little less than, it has been in the past.
I have Josh Hart on my list of pleasant surprises.
Me too.
As well. Not that, not that we haven't seen things like this from Josh Hart before, but the all around production, especially the last couple of weeks, has been really, really strong for him. Last 8 games, 13.5 points, 8.5 boards, 7.5 assists. That's been the big jump. Like we always knew the moderate scoring and then the rebounding was going to be great for his size. Defensive stats haven't really been all that good. He shot the ball pretty well from 3 on relatively low volume, but the assists that you're getting from Josh Hart have been massive. And he's been kind of right in triple double range, it feels like, on a nightly basis these last couple of weeks. And part of the reason he's on this list for me is he had a disastrous preseason to the point where you're wondering if like something was broken with his shot or with his mind. But he seems to have erased that, and he's been really good so far.
He has. The Knicks are so thin. Like, and Josh Hart he's that utility player that can come in and just play any position you need him to play. Yeah, I think, he's not going to shoot 58% from the field. I was digging into that a little bit. Like, he's 12 for 18 on floaters. He's 4 for 5 on the long mid range. Like, when that regresses a bit, he's coming down. But I still think he can shoot in the high 40s. And the reality is you didn't draft Josh Hart to score for you. You drafted Josh Hart because he's like a 10, 8, and 6 threat, and I think he'll continue playing well for them.
All right, let me get back to my list here. John Collins is another one.
Yep.
Utah's not been a very good team. They've been very up and down offensively. They have a lot of nights where they struggle to hang in games, struggle to get to 100 points. Lauri Markkanen has been, a disaster so far this season. And part of the reason for that is he's like 4th or 5th on this team in terms of usage rate on a night-to-night basis. And John Collins has taken on more responsibility in Utah. I was surprised, how highly he ranks on the year, but he's been really consistent for them. He's now in the starting lineup over these last few games. Obviously, the absence of Taylor Hendricks has helped him there, but scoring's been up, rebounding's been consistent. The shot blocking is hit or miss. We're not looking at a lot of multi-block nights for him, but he's also been taking the ball away a ton these last few games. He's got multiple steals now in 5 straight.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the biggest part of this has been the Kessler absence, but he was rosterable before that. It's not like this has come out of nowhere and he's only been a worthy fantasy player when Kessler's been out. Like, and we've seen in the past, like if you give John Collins 30 to 35 minutes and you play him at center, he's easily a top 50 player. And that's exactly what's happening in Utah right now.
Yeah, it has coincided, the step up from good start to like, wow, really good over the last week did coincide with Walker Kessler. And I assume once he's back, Collins probably loses 5 to 7 minutes a night, goes back to the bench. But nonetheless, I think like Utah was a team that I just kind of wanted to avoid altogether. Maybe take a shot on Keontae George, take a shot on Taylor Hendricks before his leg snapped in half. And it turns out I think Markkanen was the biggest landmine on that team right now.
You're right. One guy I do actually want to point out very quickly from this team while we're on the topic is Isaiah Collier.
Yeah.
Who you mentioned Keontae George, who has been struggling. And actually, George got benched to start the second half the other night, and Collier comes in.
Yep.
And he has not. The main thing is just like Collier has not put together a game yet where it's like the points and the assists have come. He had 7, 6, and 4 when he started a game.
Yeah.
But I would keep an eye on this just because I think you might have more insight into this than I do because you're more into like prospects and guys coming out of high school. Am I wrong to say that Collier would have been was a more touted prospect going into college than like Keontae George was?
Oh yeah. I mean, he was by some services, he was the number 1 recruit in the country.
Right. So he's in theory, like Collier is a guy who could take Keontae George's spot if George just can't play well. And so we shouldn't be sort of deceived by it's like, well, they're giving this guy who was picked 29th, some minutes. Does this mean anything? It's like, no, Collier probably has more upside than that. He fell in the draft.
Yeah. It's funny. I think, Collier was considered to have had a disappointing freshman year at USC. Like, I still thought you saw a lot of flashes. I think people kind of decided like, he's just not really an NBA type of player, but I think a lot of the holes in his game are similar to Keontae George's in some ways. And, Collier is more of a true, score first type of guy, but really athletic, big body, strong for his size, did not have a lot around him on that USC team. Obviously it was just kind of the Bronny James sideshow throughout last year, but I thought the defensive numbers were good. I mean, the finishing at the rim numbers were really good. Like the big knock on Collier is that he's just not a good 3-point shooter. That was the case at USC. And I think he's like 1 of 9 on the year so far in Utah. So you're going to worry about the field goal percentage. You're going to worry about the lack of threes, but I think he landed in a good spot. Like if he was on, I don't know, the Celtic or the Pacers or whoever, he'd probably spend most of the year in the G League. Like this is one of like 4 or 5 teams in the NBA where he could conceivably either start or play consistent minutes off the bench later in the year when they're just auditioning guys and trying to tank.
Yes. And so I would, if you're in a deeper points league, I would certainly have him on my radar for sure.
Yeah, points leagues especially. Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be a minutes grab at some point, and I think this is a team where that could happen. Last guy I want to point out, Alex, Franz Wagner. Not having a crazy year, but playing very well, keeping the Magic afloat. What I specifically want to point to is the big concern with him at the end of last year. After the All-Star break, And through round one of the playoffs against Cleveland, Franz Wagner shot 21% from beyond the arc. So that's a pretty large sample. He's up to 35% this year. Again, it's not like he's shooting 45%, but for a guy who we just kind of wondered, is that shot broken? I think he's at least answered that he's back to being a reliable three-point shooter.
Yeah, the 3-point shot was weird last year because he still shot 85% from the free throw line. And he's shooting the exact same for the free throw line this year, and his 3 is up. So make of that what you will. But yes, I think the people, like I drafted Franz, I think as high as the 4th round in a mock, and that's kind of where he's sitting right now. And yes, he's getting a bit of a boost because Paolo is out. But I just really like what I see from him. I would not like sell high on him necessarily with the idea, oh, Paolo's going to come back and it's going to destroy his value. Like we've seen Wagner and Paolo be able to coexist and be essentially close to code number 1 options, sort of like a 1B situation with Wagner.
You got any other players on your list? Or are we good to move on?
I mean, I have a huge list, but I will say,
let's go.
Oh man, there's like actually 25 players.
Well,
on this list.
Well, maybe not all of them then, but we can go rapid fire through some of the names. And if you want to stop on anybody,
I'll do like the biggest sort of, Benedict Mathurin. I don't think we touched on him. Obviously the Pacers are dealing with a ton of injuries. Mathurin, some of it's been Mathurin's rebounding. He's grabbing like double-digit rebounds half these games. But we always sort of knew Mathurin was a scorer, and it seemed like he was in Carlisle's doghouse last year. Now they don't really have a choice but to play him, and he's been fantastic. We got like Tari Eason doing his thing, trying to figure out, is Jabari Smith worth rostering or not in fantasy? I called him like an easy drop in 10-team leagues. Then he had 24 points or something. Which prompted me to look up how many players in the NBA have scored 20 points in a game because I was trying to defend my position. Yeah. The answer is like 175. But we talked about McCain. Christian Braun has been awesome. I think people were too low on Coby White, who's been good. J-Dub, Jalen Williams at OKC has been fantastic. After a slow start, Zach Edey is coming back to life, basically becoming the player we wanted him to be. That's kind of a grab bag off my list.
Yeah, all really good names there. Edey, by the way, went out yesterday with an injury, so we'll have to keep an eye on him coming into the week. I was definitely too low on Coby White. I thought this whole Chicago thing was going to be convoluted. You're bringing back Levine. You're bringing in Josh Giddey. Who knows about Lonzo Ball, who is just, now it's a wrist injury, and who knows how much time he's going to miss. But I just thought there was a chance that Coby White was marginalized to at least begin the year, and instead, they're just saying, we're going to play really fast. We're going to score 125 every night. We're going to let you score 135. So we're not going to win a lot of these games. But it's been a productive year. I know Coby White's coming off a really bad game against Houston yesterday, where the Bulls just got smacked. That was like arguably the biggest beatdown of the year so far, 143 to 107. But prior to that, he had 3 straight 20-plus point games, up around 20 points per game for the year. I think with all those unknowns for me, if you had told me, hey, we're a month in and Coby White's averaging 20, I would say, for me at least, that would be close to best case.
Yeah, and like you said, he's had a couple stinkers, that's for sure. But in games where he's played more than 30 minutes, where there's not a blowout, or he's averaging 22 and 5, and that's kind of what you're looking for.
Okay, we'll hit some questions in the chat in a moment, but first, we have a message from our good pals over at DraftKings Pick 6. Here at RotoWire, we're proud to be partnered up with DraftKings Pick 6 this NBA season. Think your team will score more than 100 points tonight? How about your favorite point guard making more than 4 3-pointers? Check out DraftKings Pick 6, the newest way to play fantasy basketball and win cash with DraftKings. Here's how it works. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 players of the same sport and choose if they'll have more or less of a given stat. So for hoops, we're talking points, assists, rebounds, etc. Lock in those picks, compete against opponents for your shot at huge cash prizes. Go download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use our code ROTOPICK, ROTOPICK. That's code ROTOPICK for new Pick 6 customers. Play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits guaranteed. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at picksix.com. www.draftkings.com/promos. All right. We want to thank DraftKings Pick 6 for sponsoring the program this season. Go check it out. A lot of offerings over there. Been doing a lot of NBA and NFL on DK Pick 6. Alex, let's get to the chat. We do a live mailbag every week on this episode. A lot of great questions in the chat already, so we'll hit as many of these as we can. Going back to the Charlotte Hornets, this has become the Diabate episode. Grant Williams over Diabate, asks Evan.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. He's playing the more consistent minutes. He's getting good rebounds, decent defensive stats. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Here's an interesting one. Only one says, dropped Klay for Kyle Filipowski of the Utah Jazz. Did I mess up?
I don't think so. I mean, Klay's had 2 bad games in a row. So let's, I don't want to put too much stock into those bad games where he went 1 for 11 from 3. Mm-hmm. But we know what Klay is. Like, he's only giving you points and threes at this point throughout his career, and he's not so elite in them anymore that he's 100%. He's not a top 100 player anymore.
No.
So I think I understand what you're asking. I think you have to frame it like, did I mess up by dropping Klay Thompson, period? Not like, did I pick up the wrong guy? Because I think you could probably just stream in the production you're getting from Klay. So it doesn't really matter as much like who specifically you picked up this week. You can just pick up a different guy next week and just keep streaming and doing that.
Yeah, I don't have a strong lean on this one. I mean, both teams have 3 games, so there's not really a huge advantage there. I guess I would personally rather keep Klay just because there are going to be weeks where he gives you like 4 3-pointers per game. He's coming off of 2 bad games in a row. Like you said, he's been very streaky so far this season. He's had some great nights. He's had some really bad nights. Really kind of what we saw from him last year in Golden State. I guess with Filipowski, like, he's seen a lot more minutes lately. That's coincided not only with the Hendricks injury, but also with Walker Kessler being out the last few games. Like, what exactly is he giving you? That's not, he's not going to be elite in every category, but it's like, he's not a crazy high volume rebounder. He's not really giving you consistent defensive stats. Like, what are you gaining necessarily with Kyle Filipowski? At least with Klay, you're getting production most weeks in one defined category.
Filipowski is doing the Olenek, which is which is one of his comps, right? Which is like, this guy could be Kelly Olenek. So I think if you just need those like well-rounded numbers, you can go with Filipowski. But no, I mean, I think if you end up dropping Filipowski and picking someone else back up on a different week, it's fine. He's okay, like in a deep league. But again, like you said, when Kessler comes back, he's going to be the one who gets the boot in terms of minutes, not John Collins.
Yeah. And, much like Isaiah Collier later in the year, maybe there's a time when Filipowski is unleashed, but I'm skeptical that that's going to happen once Kessler is back. Bruno says, thoughts on KPJ and Conley. So we will start with Kevin Porter Jr. with the LA Clippers. Any thoughts here off the top, Alex, before we start diving in on the game logs?
I mean, he's playing more minutes. Is Terrence Mann done? Is this it? Have we finally reached the end of Terrence Mann?
Untradeable Terrence Mann.
I mean, Porter was pretty bad at points throughout earlier in the season. Like, he was just like on-court perspective. Like, he was just,
it was bad.
He'd put up some numbers, but sometimes he'd kill you. But if he's going to play 25-ish minutes per game, he probably is going to need to be rostered in 12-team leagues. I think he's worth a speculative pickup. That is how I would put that.
13 and 14 minutes, respectively, the last 2 games for Terrence Mann. So there is some correlation there. When it comes to Mike Conley, Alex, I'm just not really willing to roster him in most leagues. 2-game week this week, by the way, for Minnesota. So if he's out there, this is not really the time to go pick him up. You're obviously not going to start him, in a weekly lineup league. I will say he's given you steals lately. He's got multiple steals in each of his last 4 games. That's really it. He only has 4 double-digit scoring games all year. The assists have been a little bit on and off, but still down considerably compared to last season. I mean, he's down to 4.8 assists per game. He's only playing 25 minutes. He got a veterans night off last week. Like, that's not a great sign. I mean, the guy's 37 years old. So I'm pretty out on Mike Conley unless it's a 4-game week for Minnesota and you're really desperate to stream somebody in.
Yeah, I mean, the steals are encouraging. He's giving you those assists. He got a minutes boost. He sat against Portland, and then they gave him more minutes. It's like, we need to rest you before you get out there and play 30 minutes in a game. But then he took 2 shots against Phoenix. So, if you need his type of stats, you can hang on to him. But if you don't really need his assists or his steals, I think he's fine to drop.
Interesting one from DJ Andre. He says, Alex Caruso or Tim Hardaway Jr.? Caruso, of course, has missed a few games in a row. He's questionable coming into the week. Hardaway has also missed some time. Two very different players that I think makes this a difficult question. Like, how much do you value Alex Caruso's steals versus what we're seeing from Hardaway, mostly with the 3-pointers and the points? 2.7 made threes per game for Tim Hardaway. And Caruso, who shot north of 40% last year from beyond the arc, just not really being asked to do anything offensively in OKC.
To me, it doesn't matter, in my opinion, which one you choose. This is completely negligible to me. If you're in a points league, I think it's negligible. Like, it is, like, they're averaging within 1 fantasy point of one another, and I don't think either of them project to have like a massively bigger role than they have going forward. Obviously, Caruso has the room to have a bigger role, and maybe that's enough for you to be like, okay, I'll grab Caruso. But in a category league, you just need to roster the guy who's giving you the stats you need.
Nerdy Nerd asks, is Grayson Allen a hold in a 12-team 9-category league? Keep in mind, in the short term, only a 2-game week for the Suns.
On a 2-game week, is Grayson Allen a hold even if Beal and KD are out? I don't think you have to hold him on a 2-game week. He's going to have some games where this is the thing with like any 3-point shooter. He's going to have some games where you're like, I can't believe I dropped this guy. He scored 22 and hit 5 threes. And then there's going to be another game where he scores like 6 points and goes 1 for 7 from 3. And you're going to be like, oh, I hate that I had this guy on my roster. So I think he's fine to drop. Again, KD's going to be out for a little while still. So Grayson Allen's going to have some more minutes and some games. But the fact that he can't get over 30 minutes, that is a concern to me as well. He's not played more than 27 minutes in a game this season.
Would you trade Donovan Mitchell for Tyrese Haliburton in an ESPN points league?
This has got to be close, right? I mean,
it's really close. Mitchell's averaging about 2 more fantasy points per game right now.
I think I'd just hang on to Mitchell.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
In a points league, that's where I lean as well. Categories, right. Maybe a different ball game. Andrew McIntosh says, question, would you drop D'Lo in a 10-team league? His play has been poor, and I'm in a tight spot having Zion, Porzingis, and Chet all injured. In a 10-team league, I think you can do a lot better. I also am sick of D'Angelo Russell. So is JJ Redick.
Yep. Since he started coming off the bench, 20 fantasy points per game. And yeah, if you're in a tight spot, 10 teams, you can let him go.
Yeah. I think Redick is just playing him the bare minimum at this point. Like, they still need D'Angelo Russell, and there's still going to be games where he goes like, 4 of 7 from 3, and you're like, okay, all right, we can live with that. But the bad has dramatically outweighed the good for him at this point. Let's see what else we got here. Shiny asks, is there any hope for Lauri Markkanen this season? Do you think he'll progress more as the season goes, or is this his ceiling till the end of the season? And he also adds, by the way, that he traded him for Bam. Feel bad for fleecing my boy. Never feel bad, man. Like, you didn't force the trade through. He had to accept it. All right. You did the right thing.
There is hope for Markkanen. I think he can get back to essentially what he was averaging last season. Like, right. 23 and 8, efficient shooting. The question is he going to stay healthy, and will he play in March? So even if he does get back up to his, to his averages from last year, how much do you trust him to stay healthy? Which I don't. I mean, you could speak more on this. You traded him away in one of your leagues.
Yeah, I saw the alarm bells early on in the season with Markkanen, and I had a bunch of other injuries for context, and just like basically couldn't afford to take like multiple zeros in this league. So I needed a warm body. Essentially traded Markkanen. I think it was Markkanen and Hield for Rudy Gobert, Terry Rozier, and Jaden McDaniels. So, honestly, like Markkanen for Gobert, I would have been okay with at that point. I know Markkanen's a better player, but the way my roster worked out, like Gobert probably was more valuable to me anyway. I have Giannis, in that league. So just kind of want to pound field goal percentage, not really worried about free throw percentage, etc. I'm seeing some concerning trends, man. Like Markkanen has always been, as far as like all-star level players go, like way more variance than most of those guys. Like the bad nights are going to be really bad. You know, you don't see someone like, I don't know, Donovan Mitchell, who's a better player than him, but like not that much better in terms of where they rank. You know, like if you're ranking the best players in the NBA, you know, I think they could be within like 10 spots of each other, whatever. Donovan Mitchell doesn't just have like nights where he plays 35 minutes and scores 12 points with four assists. You know, like Markkanen has those like once a week, and the highs have just not been that high. The other thing is you never know when the Jazz are going to get hammered by 35 and he plays like 24 minutes because the game is over. His usage rate is down to 21.6%. That's like 4 percentage points lower than last year. It's basically the same as where it was when he was in Chicago, and he was not very good with Chicago.
Yeah, your point about them getting blown out is good too. There are some signals, like if you want to try to be a Lauri Markkanen optimist, it's like the usage rate that accounts for assists also basically has him the same as last year. And from the rim this year, now some people are gonna be like, this is a bad thing. Other people are gonna say this is progression potential. Last year at the rim, he shot 70%. This year he's shooting 38% on 26 attempts, and he's also 2 for 13 from long mid range. So like those things are going to increase, and he's going to have some more efficient nights. But, you know, he, as a fantasy player, he is essentially efficient scoring and rebounding. And so if he's not scoring efficiently and he has a bad rebounding night, he gives you nothing.
He has one double-digit rebound game on the year. He's down to 6.4 rebounds per game after being at 8.2 last year. So you're getting decent rebounding, and I guess he's averaging a few more assists, but he gives you nothing defensively. He never gets steals. Right. He has 0 blocks on the year. He's shooting 43% from the field. Free throw shooting's down. I mean, we've kind of gone away from the question here, which is that will he progress as the season goes along? I think he will, because he's been so bad. Like, these are not necessarily marketed numbers. Like, it'll get better. My worry, and part of the reason I traded him away, is that once it gets better, all of a sudden you're on the clock. Utah is in 14th in the Western Conference, and he's being shut down.
Like, yes, he will progress, but also, yes, you did the right thing trading him for Bam Adebayo.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, don't feel bad about that. You did the right thing. Alex, I got to throw this one in there for you. Are we finally trusting Mark Williams to come back?
My boy, Mark Doubtful Williams. No, we're not trusting him. I can't. No. This is the whole reason I picked up Diabate, was because I don't trust Mark Williams. I don't trust Charlotte's injury reporting. I don't know what Nick Richards is being back. Just totally unclear. I pretend like they don't exist. That's unfortunately how it has to go. I don't know if it ended up going through. I think I tried to drop him in my NFBKC league. I did not see if that went through or not.
Mm-hmm. Anime Guy Gaming asks, what are your thoughts on Shaedon Sharpe? And I assume this is Jalen Duren. We'll start with Sharpe, who's back in the mix now for Portland, coming off of 2 huge games in a row, 33 against Minnesota in the second of those 2 games. And then yesterday against Atlanta, 32 points, 5 assists, 3 steals. He's 6 of 18 from 3 in that span. He's taken 44 shots in the last 2 games, which is exactly what Shaedon Sharpe likes to do. Still one of my favorite young players to watch. I mean, we've seen so little of him over the last year that you kind of forget like what a highlight machine this guy is, how athletic he is. We do need to keep in mind, though, that these last 2 games have come without Ayton, and they've come without Anthony Simons as well.
The Simons thing is big. I think the bigger indicator when it comes to like why Sharpe is playing 35 minutes a game and taking 20 shots. It's because Simons is out, and we're not sure when Simons is coming back. He has not been, his status has not been determined for the upcoming game. I think he is fine to roster. I would like roster him now, ride it while it's hot, enjoy it. But when Simons is back, I'm not 100% sure what they're going to do, partially because this roster is just a mess. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just, if you look at over the past, let's say 5 games, it's like they have tons of guys averaging in the 20-minute range. It's like Jeremy Grant's still eating shots for them. Tumagi Kamara is playing 30 minutes a game. Scoot's still getting his minutes. Delano Banton is like basically worth a pickup in a lot of leagues. Avdia is still there playing minutes. So like, it's hard to say, but I keep him going while he's hot. I think he's a really good player. Yeah. I think he's a really good prospect. Like, so those things are like a thumbs up.
I mean, Simons is dealing with an illness, so you have to think he's back in the mix pretty soon here. It's not, it's not some sort of week-to-week injury. In Portland, they do play 3 games this week, but the first one isn't until Wednesday against OKC. So it kind of dicey. I would guess Simons is back for that. That would be a really long illness absence. It's already rare to miss like more than one game with an illness, and that would basically be a full week at that point. Oh, another good one for you, Alex. Is this the true Darius Garland that we've been waiting for 2 seasons, or just a hot streak to start the year?
I think it's in between. It's sort of like last season was really bad for him because he was playing through a bunch of injuries, and then this season his shooting is unsustainably hot. Like he's up 10% on his free throw percentage and almost 10% on his 3-point percentage and basically almost 10% on his field goal percentage. That's going to come back down. But when that does come back down, you're still going to get basically 18 points and 7 assists from Darius Garland with some threes on efficient shooting. So I think it's like, let's call it 80 to 90% real.
Eddie Buzz, who's been lighting up the chat here, says, where do you get your injury updates from? We get them from our site, which we track and aggregate all the news. So, to peel back the curtain a little bit, there is, I wouldn't say conjecture, but there are parameters that we have to abide by because we provide this information to other providers. So, even if we don't necessarily think a player will play for the next, 2 weeks, if he's listed as questionable for their next game, that's where the estimated return date comes in. We go very cut and dry by the book. If a team says a player will be reevaluated in 6 weeks, then we make that the estimated return date. Again, it's not like we're just guessing. That's just what we have to do as far as, the content providers that we work with want. So that's kind of the best I can give you as far as where we get our injury updates. But we ourselves, are not, we're not calling up teams and asking for info on Asar Thompson. We just report what is out there for everyone else to consume. We got some agreement on Mark Williams. Hell no on Mark Williams, says Eddie. I agree. I think Alex agrees with me on that as well. Let's see. We'll get a couple more here before we head out. Thoughts on Donovan Clingan and Brandon Boston Jr., both recent starters because of injuries. Also, should I sell high/mid on Miles Turner?
Sell mid, just lateral. Sell mid. Boston has been fantastic, and I think he's going to continue playing really well until McCollum and DeJounte come back, and that those return dates are still sort of nebulous. So I think you just got to hang on to him.
McCollum did practice today, for what it's worth. Not saying he's going to play tomorrow, but I think he's back soon. They have a back-to-back Tuesday, Wednesday.
He'll be back soon, but, looking at their bench, is Jalen Noel going to play? Like, it's just, I think you're fine on Boston until probably DeJounte comes back. Now, is he going to be scoring 20 points with 5 assists, Boston? When McCollum comes back, that'll be less. But the Clingan thing is tough because obviously Clingan is getting minutes because Ayton's hurt, and then Clingan's also splitting minutes with Rob Williams when Ayton is out. So Clingan is a guy where we talked about this last week. I would just hang on and keep him on my bench and stash him for as long as possible. If you have the spot open, I would stash Clingan. If you don't, it just is what it is. And you might have to drop him. And then Miles Turner. That's an interesting question. I have Miles Turner in our 16-team league. I don't think he's doing anything right now that would indicate that he's playing over his head. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. The minutes maybe are a little high, but that's also because James Wiseman and Isaiah Jackson are out for the season. They're trying a little bit more Jarris Walker. But I think the fact, he's not shooting really that far over his head or anything. So I think we're fine on Miles Turner.
Okay, here's a good one to end on. So we've gotten a few questions about Jonathan Isaac and another prescient player here, Peyton Watson. Would you drop Peyton Watson in a 12-team points league in favor of Jonathan Isaac? Something to keep in mind as far as the schedule goes this week: 3 games for the Denver Nuggets, 4 for the Orlando Magic, but still looking a little bit longer term here. So Watson or Isaac?
I would keep Watson. He had a bad game the other night. I mean, that was without Jokic. 7 points against Memphis. Denver only scored 90 points. I wish we were getting just a little bit more from the steals and blocks from Watson like we hoped. But he's been good so far, and he's been playing a lot of minutes. And the thing with Isaac is, like, we've talked so long about, well, Isaac's per minute numbers. Okay, he's never going to play those minutes.
Right.
Like, we'd be like, what? Here's Isaac's per 36. Not going to happen.
His body is not capable of playing those minutes.
Like, we have to start talking about Isaac. Like, what are Jonathan Isaac's per 20 numbers? Because that's all he's ever going to play. So, like, he's going to have some games where he plays better than Watson. Like, it's just going to happen. Like, because he's going to have a hot game. But then I would just hang on to Watson.
Yeah, it's not like Isaac's numbers have been overwhelming. Like, he's not giving you like a block and a half, a steal and a half in 21 minutes. It's like Watson, to me, like, they're not that far off in terms of the defensive production. And really, that's what you're looking for here. It's like you might get slightly better rebounding out of Isaac. I will side with the guy who's going to play 30 to 35 minutes as opposed to the guy that's going to play 17 to 22 minutes. So I'm still intrigued by Isaac. I think at a 4-game week, streaming him in there, especially if you have, some of those guys on the 2-game weeks, like, it makes some sense. But you bring up a very good point. A lot of the upside with him is theoretical. And I don't think the Magic are ever going to be in a position, this is the spot, right? Like, you're without Banchero. Like, 36 minutes are out of your rotation. Like, if there was ever a time for him to prove that he could see extended minutes, it would be now. And that hasn't happened. So yeah, I think that's the call there. Great questions as always, guys. Wish we could do more, but we got to get out of here. We'll do this every single Monday, early afternoon throughout the NBA season. So make sure you bookmark that. Make sure you subscribe to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball channel on YouTube. You can also find this in podcast form on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your pods. I'll be back tomorrow morning with Brandon Kravitz. We'll be doing more listener Q&As. We got Kieran and Mike Barner on Wednesdays. And then every Friday, Alex, Ken Kreitz, Shannon McCune talking waiver wires. So again, make sure you're subscribed to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball channel. Won't miss any of that content. And you can also find all of our podcasts archived on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball YouTube channel.